Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to be back on the Results Podcast. My name is Steve Mills, and again, I'm here to share with you some tried, tested and proven ways to grow your business. Now, today I'm here with a lady that I've known only for a few months, but she's certainly someone that I've began to really start to understand, I think, her skills. And those skills are in the world of podcasting. So today's results that we're trying to achieve are ultimately, how can we improve our podcast? If we've got a podcast, that's great, and I really hope you have. If you haven't, then this will maybe be the thing that will push you over the edge and get you going in this, new fantastic podcasting world, or at least it's new for some people. I'm on, I think this is episode 188, so I've been doing it a little while now, and it's great to be here interviewing AnneMarie Cross, who's known as the podcasting queen. Now, AnneMarie's coming to us all the way from Australia today, so we really are global today. I'm over here in the UK, so we're literally worldwide. So welcome to the conversation, AnneMarie, and thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Steve. Great to be here. By the way, that name, the podcasting queen, that is not something that I gave myself. I know in the UK and Australia, we often, who does she think she is? It's something that many of my community members started calling me or referring to me as years ago. And eventually I thought, you know what, it grew on me and I thought I'm going to embrace that title. So
good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love things like that. I think one of the things that's really important in whatever you do, whether it's podcasting or webinars or whatever, is to be different. If you can be different in your marketing, then I think that's a real key. So just to kick off, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about you and how you became the podcasting queen?
Well, that takes us right back to 2008. I was in the career industry working with job seekers, but also executives, professionals who wanted to climb the corporate ladder, so helping them in resume development, interview coaching, that kind of thing. But for those of us who were in business and maybe even in careers at that time, you would recall that was when the global financial crisis hit.
Yeah.
And one of the things that a colleague and I, and he was also in the career industry, we were quite disillusioned with the doom and gloom that mainstream media, which typically was print, it was radio and television, were all talking about the downfalls, the downcast, all of that, which it was true. There were a lot more challenges ahead for job seekers and things were different and certainly were difficult, but we knew that if people continued to listen to the doom and gloom, it was going to impact their psyche, and we wanted to be the voice of hope and inspiration. We had no idea what we were doing. We used a platform called Blog Talk Radio, which when we go back and listen to some of those early episodes, it was like, the sound quality was just horrendous. Yeah. But it was the platform that we had. My co-host and colleague had done 12 months of radio hosting studies, and he was told at the end of that 12 months, you do not have a voice for radio, it's too squeaky. So he kind of had a bit of training in that area, and we just started because we knew the message that we wanted to share around the world was going to help people, and it certainly did. But an area that we struggled in, Steve, because podcasting, no one knew what a podcast was. People, even years after we'd done that for 2 years, what are you doing in this podcasting? No one's listening to podcasts, that kind of thing. But I knew it was an incredibly powerful medium because of the results as far as influence and as far as impact had been concerned. The feedback that I got from our listeners to say, we love listening to your show. We book this in every single week. We were doing it live, mind you. So any technical issues, it was live on air. I had one time where I had to fill a whole hour where a guest had got the time schedules incorrect, and I had no guests lined up. And I thought, well, that's great. My co-host is on holiday. What am I going to do? But luckily, out on Twitter, and I filled the show with some of the regular listeners. We did the show. But, looking back, the thing that we struggled with the most was monetization. And whilst we hired mentors back then who were traditionally from mainstream media, really the only thing that they could share with us was you need sponsors and you need advertisers. But what was then looked at as negative is now really positive in that podcasting is a real niched space. It's a real niche audience. And the narrower you go, the faster you will grow. That's what I say to people. Even if you're not podcasting your message out on whatever medium you're sharing that on. And so whilst back then we could not approach sponsors and advertisers because they were looking at, what are the hundreds and thousands of audience and listeners and so forth. We just didn't achieve that at that stage. And so we ended the show. I continued to podcast through the years. And it wasn't until 2014 I entered into a partnership. And mind you, there is a method to why I'm sharing this, because it takes me on the journey to where I am today. So I entered into a partnership, and that unfortunately came to an end. And I took a step back and I thought, my goodness, this is the worst business failure ever. What am I going to do? Couldn't write, couldn't create content anymore. And I'm a prolific content creator. And I thought, I can't write, I can't do anything like that. But what I can do is ask really good questions. So I'm going to start Women in Leadership podcast and go out and seek out women who have overcome challenges, overcome failure, and what are their secrets? What are the things that they do? And unbeknownst to them, that's what I did. 3 episodes in, I accidentally generated 2 4-figure clients. And it wasn't until later on I thought, man, if I can do that by accident, starting a podcast that I had only as a way for me to continue to engage as I got over that bump. And if I could do that accidentally, imagine if I backtracked. What were the steps that had these 2 people who had absolutely no idea who I was come across the website, listen to those 3 episodes where I was interviewing people? If I could bottle that up, what could I do if I did that intentionally? So that's what I did. Took some time out, really tracked what were the steps and what was there that enabled them to come to the conclusion that I want to work with AnneMarie. What's the best program for us? And so a program, a book, later Podcasting with Purpose has now come about. So that's really where I love to support, change makers who are service-based businesses who really are experts in their particular field. How do I position myself as that trusted authority, but be able to use my podcast as a way to build reach, my reputation as that trusted authority, and ultimately revenue as you begin to nurture those listeners into leads, inquiries, and ultimately paying customers. So it was through that accident that has now come about and really track those steps, and that's what I love to teach others.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. It's interesting, isn't it, how businesses start. They're often so varied, that people lose their job or decide that they want to go into business because they've been doing the work for many, many years. But people are very different. I love that story. That's fantastic. So, I like you, have been doing this for quite some time. I've actually been around in the marketing space advising people for 25 years. I was obviously very young when I started, but in that time the world has changed. Back when I started off, you had a choice of the probably the best 2 mediums were, you could advertise on the TV or you could advertise on the radio and newspapers, magazines, and so on and so forth. Now you could argue that TV has been replaced, although obviously it's still around, but certainly YouTube has taken over that advertising opportunity for small businesses. A lot of us can't afford the TV still, but we can afford to get on YouTube. And the same sort of radio thing, I'm going to pay my £5,000 or whatever it is, dollars, it's about a half, is that right? It's about $10,000, £5,000, is that correct? I'm not quite sure where we are at the moment.
Well, we're in dollars.
Is that right? In Australia, So whatever it is, anyway, we can do that, or we can set up podcasts. Now I know we were talking before the podcast today that podcasting's not like radio, and I do understand that, but it's a way of getting voice out there to the world, isn't it? So what are the differences, do you think, between traditional radio advertising and having your own podcast? And why would you have your own podcast rather than go and spend a load of money on radio?
Great question. And I hinted to it earlier where I said it's very much a niched audience. And so what I traditionally see, and I've had a number of conversations with businesses who've set up podcasts, and what they've done is they've followed the model of mainstream radio where you have a number of guests on the show and you intertwine ads. So you might do some ad stacking where sponsors and advertisers get their message out to your audience. And, one particular example was a gentleman who has a business, a fitness business. And so his idea was, if I interview other businesses and talk about business topics, and then kind of in the middle and maybe at the end, I'll give a little bit of a spiel about who I am, because obviously if you're fit physically in your business, you're going to show up far better mentally, and that will impact your productivity. And then I said to him, well, what about some of your ideal clients? Are they really struggling with? Imagine if you had identified some of the key struggles, some of the challenges, and started to speak into that, and created a podcast series that really addresses that, but takes someone through that's interested and is sick and tired of being sick and tired with struggling with their health, identifying some of the key steps and then nurturing them through that. And as they're getting those mini wins, they're getting to know, like, and trust you even better. And then that call to action is, if this is something that you want to talk about, let's jump on a call and have a chat to see where I can possibly help you. Now, rather than having conversations which were really not relevant to his ideal client, he was talking to all sorts of business owners in his network about all sorts of different topics that really his ideal client's probably not really thinking about, well, I'm listening to this podcast because there is an issue that I'm struggling with my health, and I think that this particular episode can help me. And so, you'd have to take a lot more time in getting different content out. And I think podcast audiences, from what I know to be true for myself when I'm listening and what I'm getting feedback from people who are avid podcast listeners, is the thing that they hate the most is being sold to and having interruptions where an ad comes in and said, hey, you want to buy blah, 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 blah. We instantly turn off. Even when we see banners, on Facebook and things like that, we've tuned that. So why not influence someone and enter a conversation where they're at, and then bring them along on that journey? And so what I now share with people is, that accident where I accidentally made I had 3 podcasts and made 2 4-figure clients. We now say to people, create a 3-part podcast series that nurtures your ideal client through the different areas, looking at their customer journey. What do they need to know? What's the next step? And as they start to walk that journey with you and build that trust and have those mini wins, they're then in your funnel, they're then in your nurturing system that you can then really build that relationship with, rather than having these random ads positioned within your podcast. And that's one of the things that I think works really well. Then you can look at your guesting strategy. You can look down the track at some of your sponsor strategies too, because you may be able to interview people who are also working with your ideal clients, which means the topic that they're sharing and speaking into is going to be relevant for your client. And as they're sharing that with their audience, they're also having an opportunity to interact with you. And then guess what? The call to action at the end of your podcast is, if this is something you're struggling with, I dive deeper into my podcast series. Here is where you can access that. And so what you're also doing, and something else that I've been monitoring and have gotten some great feedback, when we are offering a call to action and a resource, give the initial resource in the medium or in the mode that they are consuming the content where you're inviting them to access. So in other words, if you are sharing a topic on a podcast, or you've got your own podcast, don't invite people to sign up for an ebook or a book or something like that, because I've had feedback from colleagues who are not readers, which is why they love the audio platform, because they love to listen. Yeah. Of course, what you then do is you can then give bite-sized content with transcripts and other, gifts and resources that you can share with that. But don't let that be a block where people think, no, I'm not signing up for a webinar series, or just at that time yet. Because remember, when we're looking at the customer journey, there are different things that we need to tick in the mind of our ideal clients to say, yes, I'm going to give you extra time. Yes, I'm going to give you extra time. And then down the track, you can give them more resources from reading, a webinar and so forth. But I find that a podcast series works really well because they're listening to a podcast in that initial interaction. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, yeah. And that's how I consume podcasts. I'm really an absolute fan of them. I mean, obviously, I've got my own, but, I spend a lot of time, when I'm in the car, pretty much, I'm listening to podcasts, and... It's great when I go down the gym, I go out walking. I'm listening to podcasts pretty much all the time. The only other thing I do is Audible, buy the book and listen to that as well. So I'm either doing one thing or the other, and it's a great way of learning. In business, it's really tough, I think, to find the time as a business owner to learn, and as a marketer. It's also massive. It's just massive, the amount of learning we need to do. Google's just released this, and then, LinkedIn's changed, and Facebook's got a new something, and all of a sudden it's like a full-time job just trying to keep up to date. Yeah, and taking an hour out and of work and going and sitting down and learning something new about marketing often is really tough. But doing that on a podcast is actually really easy because I call it, in fact, I pinched this from Tony Robbins. He calls it net time, no extra time. Doesn't take any extra time because I'm driving anyway, or I'm walking anyway, or I'm in the gym anyway, and I've got the podcast on at the same time. So it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
Now,
and no stronger medium than actually being able to speak into someone's ears.
Yes. Well,
if you subconsciously, you're really getting into that. And I know that there's been some people who say, but video is powerful too. It is.
Yeah.
Some mediums where I've even heard that a lot of people have given feedback that whilst they may have access to video, they're not actually watching it. They've minimised it and they're still doing a secondary activity.
I do that. I've got two screens here. The one I'm looking into. Yeah, I've got the one I'm looking into now. Then I've got one over there, which I sometimes have training on in the background. Like I might have YouTube or something like that. But I'm often half listening to it as I'm working. And, you're absolutely right. It's so true. So with my podcast at the moment, I've got it's around about 4,000 subscribers, so we've sort of built it up. It's not doing bad, and we got it. One of the things I think is great about a podcast is not so much the podcast itself, but how you can get it out there. So it's on YouTube automatically. It's on iTunes. It's on Amazon. It's on I forget now, but it's on Facebook, and a shed load of different radio stations pick it up as well. What are your thoughts or tips to anybody about actually, how do they grow their fan base and grow that podcast?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's a never-ending looking at all of the different ways that you can get it out there. And I know that we can create different snippets. But one of the things that I have found is that when you look at so many business principles around marketing and what you know to be true around your message, really honing in, and I think even taking time now to look and revisit what's going on in my ideal clients' space, in their industry, in their company, their business, that because of what's been happening has caused a number of different challenges. So I think it's even more important for businesses to go really narrow and deep. And if you speak into that and bring your expertise, if you share innovation, if you do those things around the content development and sharing, that immediately you're going to be miles ahead, so much so that your audience is going to share your content on your behalf.
Yeah.
And don't forget too that with the podcast audience, it's unlike where you might have people engaging with you if you're doing a live, doing a video and you're actually interacting with people.
Yeah.
A podcast audience, the feedback that you get, I would say, is just a small portion of the people who will listen. And I've even had people who've said, oh man, I just feel like I'm speaking to an empty room. And then every now and again, they'll get a message that just completely, this is why I'm doing it. And I said, for that one message, there's probably 100 other people that are listening to your podcast that you'll never know about.
Yes, yeah.
So that's to be mindful about that too. But also, what are you doing as far as other things? I mean, you mentioned some great ways that you are able to share, because I think now is so important that even though we know that get on a platform and really double down on that, yes, that's still very important because you don't want to stretch yourself out too thin, but you also want to be able to have multi-channels where even if you're sharing small snippets so people can find you, consume that, and then you get them onto your list and start to nurture them that way.
Yeah.
So whilst I say to people, don't be so concerned about the vanity numbers. I mean, I would rather have 1,000 people who are active listeners, who are my ideal clients, my ideal community who are engaged, than 1 million downloads and no one doing anything.
You're so right. Yeah, absolutely.
Podcast as far as downloads, but they had to walk away because they couldn't monetize it. And so work on vanity, and don't focus on vanity metrics, but work on your reputation equity, which is all of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because then you will notice that they will share that content for you.
I think what you just said there is a really important point, because, work on your reputation. I think actually just having a podcast improves your reputation. It's a little bit like writing a book. And people go, oh, wow, this person's written a book. They must be an expert. Oh, wow, they've got a podcast. They must be an expert in what they do. So there's that perception, it's like positioning you, let's say towards the top of the pyramid, just because you've got a podcast. And then the fact that you've got, an amount of listeners only adds to that. So let me ask you another question. What would your tips be in terms of the physical delivery? But making sure your podcast, when you press that button and turn it on, that you deliver, really good content in a really good way.
Yeah, great question. One of the things that I learned years ago as part of my business training was around communication and recognizing the different styles of communication and how visual communicators, we need to know straight away what are the things that I'm going to take away from this, what am I going to learn, why should I give my attention. And so one of the things that I say with podcasting and how you communicate, especially in a very busy crowded space, for attention for our ideal clients, you need to let people know right up front what it is that they're going to learn. And so gone are the days when you really are bantering. There is room for banter, but again, if we look at the customer journey, and this is one of the things I say to clients, where are you going to be using your podcast as far as the customer journey? Are you going to use it for people who don't yet know you? Well, then you would not spend a lot of time bantering, because I don't know you yet and I don't care what you're doing on the weekend. What I do care about is this information going to be relevant for me. But if I've done business with you and I know who you are and I really like you and I want to spend a bit of time for you, I don't mind if you share that, because I'm actually interested in you as an individual, which is why I'm investing with you. So if you're tending to use it for already an engaged audience and maybe with inside a closed group that you're already nurturing and working with, going to be completely different as far as topic is concerned and as far as information is concerned. But what I've tended to do, and I've always done that, I always let people know right at the onset, this is my introduction, what are they going to learn? I always look at 3 key points that they're going to, if they give me their attention for that half an hour or so, these are the things that my guest and I are going to talk about. This is what you're going to walk away with. And I'm pretty much straight into the interview straight away, right from the beginning, rather than a lot of what I call fluff and banter at the beginning.
Sure.
That's why message is so important, even before the make and model of your microphone, because this is one of the things I say, you can't edit compelling content that converts from fluff and banter, because people have probably gone, next, because there's so much content out there. And secondly, what I share with people, and I've created, and we probably don't have time to go into it today, but what I call the podcast positioning quadrant. And there's 4 different quadrants. where if you look on the left-hand side going up, it's the audience, so low and high, and then down the bottom from the 0 to outwards, it's low to high too, and that is your authority. Okay. And when you are, and there's nothing wrong with each of these quadrants, it's just where you want to be. Now you can be an entertainer, which is fine, but you have low, highly engaged audience and people who love who you are, and you low authority because you're not really talking about topics that are of any authority, of expertise that someone's going to go away with. They're just there to be entertained. Then if you go above the entertainer, you look at more of a celebrity and an influencer. So whilst they may have a highly engaged audience, because the people love who they are, and the host has a real charisma that resonates with the audience, they have low authority because they're not actually seen as an expert in a particular field or topic. Then if we have a look at the right-hand side from the entertainer, it is the expert. And this is where there is high authority. And this is where I say to people will come to your podcast for the topic, but they'll return for the host. Because whilst they can listen to any podcast, many podcasts that talk about various topics that you talk about, that topic has attracted them, and how you would engage and how you've created this unique experience, that's what gets them back. And that's where you see you become a trusted authority, because you've got high audience, high charisma, high engagement, and you're also seen on that high authority with your content. And so that's what I really share with people, from the topic headline to how you engage and bring that information across, keeping in mind the different communication styles and what they need as you're guiding them through each and every episode. That's when you can keep people really engaged right through to the end. And those who are ready, which is a smaller percentage, that call to action is going to be far more compelling as you continue to seed and lead through that episode. So those are the kind of things that I really recommend people think about. And if you do that consistently, you're going to create a promise of value and a promise of expectation that every single episode that you share, they're going to walk away with some golden nuggets to be able to implement, because you know who your ideal audience is, and the value you continue to offer in their content is going to be relevant for them.
I love that. I thought that was brilliant. I love the idea of that 4 quadrants, and my aim certainly would be to try and get myself into that, where I'm known, I'm delivering good content, I'm delivering valuable information, and people are. I'll give you a perfect example. And I was talking about this to someone the other day. I was talking about buying training. Just generally, I spend quite a lot of money training myself in marketing and sales, and I've spent, I dread to think, certainly way over £30,000-40,000 on my own training of my own money. And my criteria for doing that is really, I think, based on personality of the person rather than the content of the training. So if somebody comes to me that I don't know, Fred Blogs comes and says, I've got a training course on how to do podcasts. And I think, I'd quite like to learn how to do that better, but don't really know, Fred. Whereas if somebody like, I don't know, a Grant Cardone or AnneMarie Cross or somebody like that, comes, who I know, who I respect, and I know is an expert, actually the training's not quite so important. So if somebody like, say, a Tony Robbins comes along and says, right, I got a new course, this is what it's about, I'm signed up, Great trainer, spent many thousands of pounds with him over the years. And if he's got something new that he tells me is good, he's got that credibility with me already to know that, right, I'm going to buy that because it's Tony Robbins and I know it's going to be good. So it's a really powerful thing. Getting to that level, not easy, but incredibly powerful.
Yeah. One of the things that you said there, and I really do encourage people to think about that. That's all part of what I call personal branding. Yeah. That's what I spent decades working on in the career industry.
Sure.
So wonderful how now we bring that into, well, how can you bring that forward within your podcast? And a lot of times it's actually just allowing yourself to be you. And one of the interesting things, and I'll share this and then I'll go back and share what we were talking about beautifully with the Tony Robbins example, is that statistics have proven, and even through Edelman Trust Barometer, and I think I might have mentioned that through our conversations before we started on here on the podcast, Edelman is an organisation that monitors what creates trust. And they have, over the years, they've been doing this for several decades, but over the last number of years, what they've proven is people do not like scripted and they do not like things to be over-professional. Because what happens is, if you look at some of the industries, such as government, such as media, such as, what other is there? There's not-for-profit, and then there's also industry. Two of the least trusted industries, believe it or not, is politics, government, and media.
I believe that.
Because of fake media.
Yeah.
So anything that seems a little bit overproduced, we instantly go, don't know if I trust that. There's skepticism. And so people love that authenticity. And what I find when I share that with people is you don't need to do a million takes. You don't need to sound like a broadcaster.
You and we're totally in agreement here. Yeah. People say to me, you do lots of videos, Steve, and lots of podcasts. How long does it take you to do them? And I say, well, a 10-minute videos, it's about 10 minutes. What? They look at me and go, so what about the scripting? I've never scripted a video. I've been doing this 25 years now. I can just talk, I just go for it. Think of a subject, and probably have 2 or 3 things as you suggested. Right, these are the 3 points I'm going to go through, and I'm experienced enough, just like you are. The structure of this podcast today, we didn't really say, right, I'm going to ask this, you're going to ask that, and that's what you're going to say. We just went for it, didn't we? And hopefully we produced a really good podcast. I'm sure we have. But it's a really good point that I really do like the idea of that.
Hopefully that for some people who think, I don't have the voice or I don't have the backdrops and things like that, if they're going to incorporate live streaming, you don't actually need to do that. In fact, if you look at some of the YouTubers now, if I think of my daughters, especially my youngest one, she is glued to YouTube with all of these influencers. She's at that age. And they really are speaking into that life. And some of them, they're just holding their mobile phone, their smartphone, and off they go with their content. Just getting back to that charisma and Tony Robbins, and I'll be brief in this, but one of the things that I've noticed when we're really wanting to build that trusted authority, there's 3 key areas that you want to focus on. There is content, and you want that to be cut through content. How are you challenging the status quo? What's unique? What are some of the things that can be validated through what other industries have been doing some research? Like for me, I often will go to Edelman, I'll look at some other sources to validate what I'm also seeing, and I bring that forward in my content. Then the second is community. If you know that your ideal client is this particular person, these are the core values, this is what they're looking for, you create that community where people have a common like-mindedness. That is when that community actually starts to create this entity in and of itself. But then the third C is charisma. And that is where you need to know, what is my secret sauce? What do I do that when I just step into that fully and just be me and give myself permission to be me, that is when my community loves what I'm doing, what I stand for. They want to aspire to be like me and the impact that I, because many of us are service-based businesses, we're teaching what we know to be true because we've lived it. We've made all of the mistakes and then some and now are teaching principles that will help our clients get to where they want to be far quicker without all of the heartache and the expense that we've paid to get there. And so when we have those 3 key things that consistently comes through in every piece of content, whether you're podcasting, live streaming, writing an article, whatever, that will continue to have what I call the layered reputation building, because every single piece, whether it be on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, people are consistently seeing this message that's on brand, on topic. And eventually when they get to their buying stage where, I'm ready to make that decision, you're always top of mind because you're someone that they want to learn from. And that's exactly what you mentioned. Tony Robbins, you love what he does. He cheers, I'm doing this course, and you're already kind of thinking, well, I'm booked. What is that course?
Yeah, it's almost, I want to book it. What is it?
By the way, what is the course that we're doing?
Yeah, there's the money, Tony. What is it we're doing? Yeah, and joking aside, when you get to that level, I've probably got about 15, perhaps 20 people who I know in the world are world-leading experts in sales and marketing that they've got me to that level where if they do something, pretty much I want to get myself signed up to that, assuming time and so on and so forth. So that's really powerful. Look, we're just about to come to the end. Sadly, it's gone really, really quick. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. I'm sure they have. I thought it was fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your time, AnneMarie. It's been brilliant. So just to finish off, could you just tell people how they can access you, what you can do for them, and what's the best way of getting in touch?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Steve. So I have a 90-day program, which is called Podcasting with Purpose, Idea to Launch. But one of the things that I say to people is a podcast, as you probably already gathered, is an amplification vehicle. There's no sense launching a podcast if one of the struggles or challenges that you've had is my message is not cutting through and I'm actually not getting any clients. I would advise you to spend some time and really nail that message. You should already be getting clients from that, and then you're ready to layer that podcast over the top. If you're not quite ready, I've created the Influence Alliance, which is the business building communities for change makers. We build those core foundations in the message, signature systems, signature programs, a digital asset, and we create a quiz. We help our clients create a quiz. One of my clients got 3 VIP clients, and now she's building a course because she said, my calendar's full. I don't want to take on any more private clients because I know that's going to stretch me thin. But now she knows when she layers the podcast strategy on top of that, her message is working already. She knows that it's going to work. So the influenceralliance.com is a really great place to start. If people are still not sure about that message and they want to get that core foundations in place, and then from there, once they're in that community, and it's a low membership type, which allows them to tap into a great community and great content to help them build that. And then the podcastingwithpurpose.com is where they can find out a bit more information about the podcasting course. And the program is one where I am working closely with people every single week to get them from idea to launch. And I've also got some private client work that I can do, a few that I take on board every month as well. I'm happy to have a chat. Just reach out to me.
Fantastic.
At podcastingwithpurpose.com, the contact details.
There you go, podcastingwithpurpose.com. Thank you. That's brilliant. So just remains for me to say a big thank you to everybody who's either watching perhaps on YouTube today or who's live on my podcast. It's great to have you here. Thank you for your time. Really look forward to speaking to you again soon. If you need any help from ourselves, then feel free to go to stevemills.co. Have a look at what we do. If you want to book a meeting, if you want to attend my webinar, you'd be very, very welcome to do so. And look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. Thank you very much for listening.
It's a wrap, as they say.